That's sophomores are back on blue first group, so I'm expecting 5. Let's see what we have. Good morning. Do we have Blanca? No. She's going to be online today? Okay. She's not in yet. I see Erie is on. I see Gabriel is on. Marcos is here. And you are Liliana. Okay. Oh, things move. There she is. Oh, Blanca, you just made it under the wire. I was about to mark you tardy. Okay. Good morning. I said that. Today, we're going to have some fun. This is one of my favorite lessons in this class. Because now that we've dealt with all of that multiplying of binomials, the immediate question that comes to mind, possibly comes to mind, maybe it doesn't come to your mind, is, hey, what about unmultiplying? It's kind of hard to divide those things again. Today, we are going to talk about factoring. The single most useful algebra topic you can take into the rest of your math career. Yes, I will stand by that, okay? Because, anecdotally, every time I got stuck on math in college, the answer was usually factor. Like 90% of the time. The problem was I needed to factor the expression first to put it in a easier to work with format and actually do what I wanted to do with it. Okay? So this is a skill that we are going to drill until you can't get it wrong. Okay? And I've made that as easy as possible. I have set up a sequence, a process that you can go through every time and factor without fail. I call it the 7 rules of factoring. They're on screen now, right? So, first rule of factoring is don't talk about factoring. Okay, that's a movie reference. Anybody heard of Fight Club? No? It's an old movie, but very famous line. First rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. So, first rule of factoring, don't talk about factoring. Second rule of factoring, don't talk about factoring. Spoilers, we're totally going to talk about it, right? But you don't tell your friends. Keep this secret skill to yourself, and you just show off. Don't tell them. Third rule of factoring, now we get to some math, right? Third rule of factoring, GCF. You know what GCF stands for? Yeah, you've heard it before, right? Greatest common factor, absolutely. Okay? But I'm going to turn this into more of a chant. And it's not going to be as impressive with just the 2 of you here, everybody there at home. But the idea is, I want you to think of GCF as like football stadium chant, right? GCF. Because that, I know it's ridiculous, but that's what locks it into your brain. All right? So, recap. First rule of factoring, don't talk about factoring. Second rule of factoring, don't talk about factoring. Third rule of factoring, GCF. Because that's the number one thing you need to look for first. Right? And we'll go through some examples of all of these. When is the best item? But these are in order for a reason. I want you to identify GCFs before you try to search for special products. The special products that we just went over, right? Now you want to recognize the reverse end. I want you to find that trinomial, that square sandwich, as I called it yesterday. Right? Spot that and say, that's a special product. Yeah, but sometimes they try to trick you. Sometimes they take that perfectly good, perfect square trinomial and they like multiply everything by 5. And so now all of a sudden the numbers aren't squares anymore. So you got to spot the GCF first. Everything here is divisible by 5. Pull that out. Now I've got squares on both ends. Now I can factor it and I get my 2 binomials, right? That's the secret. They're in this order for a reason. Look for the easy stuff first. GCF, then special products. That's rule 4. Rule 5, grouping. Okay? If it's not a special product already, see if it can be factored by grouping. Okay? And that's where you don't have a GCF in the whole thing. Maybe these 2 terms have one GCF. These 2 terms have a different GCF. Okay? Very common that will be the case. So see if you can group them together and then start finding GCFs. You work through it again. It's a cyclical process. You'll go down the list, and then each time you identify something, start back. Okay, now is there a new GCF? Can I spot a special product now? Maybe you'll group things together, pull out a GCF from one group, the other is left as a special product. Right? If that doesn't work, the very end, the absolute fail-safe, is the Tchart. Okay. We'll go to the Tchart next. But this is where you actually start crunching the numbers and go, okay, fine, I can't use any of the easy shortcut ones. We just got to run through all the possibilities. All right? And with enough practice, even the Tchart can become quick and easy in some cases. Depends on the numbers you're given, right? And then finally, rule number 7, GCF again, because I had to add this here. I used to think 6 rules would be enough, but no, I need that last GCF. Because time and time again, students will go through and they'll spot a special product, or they'll group things, or most likely it's in the middle of a Tchart situation. And they forget at the very end, they're like, okay, I did all that, I think I factored it, but you didn't factor it completely because your final answer, all the numbers were even. You can still GCF factor out a 2, and they didn't do that. Which, as it turns out, means that you could have done it back here. Every time you can GCF at the end, you could have also GCF at the beginning. So this is a final double check. Hey, did I make sure I got all the GCFs? Sometimes you'll find problems very doable without, and you'll skip that bit. It happens to the best of us. I've done it before. Like, oh, wait, I could have just taken this out earlier. It would have made the numbers all smaller and easier to manage. It's okay if it doesn't happen that way. That's why we check again. All right, so I'm going to run through the list once again. And folks on Zoom, go ahead, unmute. But chant with me. I want to hear everybody's voice. First rule of factoring. Don't talk about factoring. Thank you, Bob. Second rule of factoring. Don't talk about factoring. Good. Third rule of factoring. GCF. Right. Fourth rule of factoring. Fifth rule of factoring. Grouping, good. Sixth rule of factoring. Tchart. This is another one where you can put some punch into it. Right? Tchart. Right? Get that. Oof. Okay. Seventh rule of factoring. GCF. Very good. All right, you repeat that list to yourself. Every once in a while throughout the year, I will ask you, hey, what are the 7 rules of factoring? And we'll go through it again. Because this is the thing I want to mnemonically lock in your brain. Because it'll be useful. All right. So here we go. Here's some bits from the book, right? Anytime you're factoring a polynomial, look for the GCF first. Because at the very least, it's going to make the numbers that you have to work with for the rest of it way easier. Right? Nobody wants to try to start multiplying and dividing 108 by 214. Right? That's the numbers you're dealt. So GCF, factor out for whatever, get those smaller. Okay? And yes, this applies to all polynomials. I know we're technically in the quadratic section. Quadratics is just a small polynomial. Right? So for a couple of these examples, we're going to go big before going up. Right? Spot the GCF. Make sure you're looking for numbers and variables. Okay? So for this first one, right? 12 and 9, those have a common factor. Yes, they do. It would be 3, right? So we can factor out the 3, leave the remainder, okay? But also check the variables. Do they have any letters in common? Yes, they do. They've got x in common, so we can factor that out. How many x's can we factor out? You factor out whatever the smallest number is among them, smallest exponent, you factor out all of those. Okay? So this one loses all the x squareds. This one loses an x squared. 3 minus 2 leaves 1. So this is only x. You're going to need your exponent rules here. So we pull up a 3, we pull up the x squared, parentheses, what's left? 12 divided by 3 is 4. X cubed divided by x squared gives us just a single x, plus 9 divided by 3, 3. Yx squared divided by x squared, that's the y, right? Ah! You tricked me. Here, all right. Go ahead and do the other 3 examples on your own right now. One more minute. All right, for the sake of class time, I'm going to go on. There's PDF, what number 4 would look like. Should have pulled out a squared b. And unfortunately, yeah, no numbers come out of there. No GCF mononomials there. All right. After GCF, the next step would be the special products, right? And we talked about those last time. Here's a quick reminder. You might see these different, right? Now that we're on the factoring side, we're going backwards. Right? We looked at them going forward. Oh, what happens when you have a plus and a minus binomial? You get the difference of two squares. What happens when you have the binomial times itself? Right? You get this perfect square trinomial. Right? So we've got a different name for the one on the other end. But we already written down these, so I need you to recognize those. Now, that third column that we did, right? We said that here's the before being multiplied, here's what they look like after being multiplied. You want to recognize both sides of that equation. Okay? This is sum and difference of two cubes. Is it worth knowing? It could be. If you really want to commit to it, you'll probably get some value out of it. It's not that common, and you can work it out yourself. I don't think you really need to try to memorize this. I haven't found it to be the most useful. Difference of squares, perfect square trinomial, way more common. So, grouping, right? There's a reason grouping is where it is. Because sometimes the Tchart, which would be the next level down, right? Grouping doesn't work by itself. Sometimes a Tchart problem will turn into a grouping situation down the line. Start with a chart, you simplify it into a grouping situation, and then the grouping is just advanced GCF, really. There was not one GCF across the whole thing, right? All of these together do not share a number, they do not share a letter. But if we take a piece at a time, looking at just this half, well, these two, I can factor out a squared. And from these two, I can factor out the 3. And interestingly enough, I get the same thing left over. If I factor out a squared from this half, I get an a minus 4. If I factor out the 3 from this half, I get a minus 4 left. And so this is where the grouping really shines. Yeah, well, if you had to, this would be simpler than that. Okay, great. But now we get it back down to 2 binomials, because now this is a binomial. I'm not sure if you can see that, right? This is one thing. This is another term being added together. This is one big binomial. It has other stuff inside of it. But it's still a binomial. And you can factor out a common factor from both pieces. The a minus 4 is the common factor of this binomial. So we pull that out in front. What's left? The a squared and the 3. And so now this method has let us turn that great big 4-term third power polynomial into just 2 binomials being multiplied. Okay? That's pretty amazing. So why don't we do one? Let's do one here. Go ahead and practice number 1. And then we'll talk about Tchart. From the first half, I'll pull out a 4x squared, leaving with just an x plus 2. And then from the second half, it's already an x plus 2. So you're going to have to be a little sneaky here. Let's like say we factor out a 1 from the x plus 2, just so it looks the same. And now we can say, now this is a separate factor I can pull out of here. And you get the x plus 2 times 4x squared plus 1. See how that works? So sometimes that'll happen. All right, next level. If you couldn't group it right away, maybe you have to Tchart it, especially if it's only 2 or 3 terms. Right? The grouping clearly only works when you specifically have 4 terms. So if it's 2 or 3 terms, you're going to have to go for the Tchart. And the Tchart comes from this process right here. When it's written in standard form, you're trying to find factors of AC that will add up to B. And so if you don't immediately see it in your head, sometimes they're easy. Sometimes it's not immediately obvious, and so you start making a chart. Say, okay, for this example, 5 times 6 is 30, and I need them to add up to negative 13. So you start listing things. What times what is 30? I could do 5 times 6. They need to add to a negative, so we would take the negative of both versions. What is negative 5 plus negative 6, though? Well, that's only negative 11. That doesn't work, right? Okay, try another set. 2 and 15, right? Those multiply to 30. What if you added 2 plus 13? You get negative 15. You get positive 15. Made them both negative. You get, well, that's negative 15, but we need negative 13. So close. Why did I say 2 times 13? That's not 2 times 15, sorry. And then you add them, you get 17, right? Still doesn't happen. Very close. If you could subtract one of them, it would work. Right? If it was subtracted, if it was like negative 2 plus 15, or sorry, negative 15 plus 2, yeah, but then that multiplies to negative 30. You only need positive 30. Right? So you got to play with these combinations until you find the one that works. And so finally, it's going to have to be negative 10 times negative 3. Right? And that will finally add together to give me negative 13. Right? So that's the process. So that's why I call it the Tchart method. Because when in doubt, you make the Tchart. Start listing factors. Okay? I've seen students try to skip this. And they say, no, I can do it. I don't have to write it down. And they sit there, they're staring at me like, I don't know, I can't find it. Did you write down your factors? No. Make a list. Keep track of it. With enough practice, you can get to the point where the Tchart method becomes the FBI method. With enough skill. And this is the factor by inspection. This is where you can just look at the thing and factor. Stare at it hard enough. Be like, I'm going to inspect this thing. Be like, let's inspect it and look at it. Work. And you're asking yourself this exact same question. But you have enough experience with the numbers to see this faster without writing them all down. Okay? It's very possible you're at that point for some problems. They'll come easy. You'll look at it and be like, oh, it's got to be that. Others, not so much. And then the final wrinkle. When you do that, what do you do with those numbers? Well, you do one of two things. If the leading coefficient is a 1, if A was in fact 1, you are in what I call easy mode Tcharts. Because in easy mode Tcharts, you could take those two numbers So for example here, 1 times 10 is 10. Then they need to add up to 7. That would be 2 and a 5, right? 2 times 5 is 10. 2 plus 5 is 7. It's all positive. You take those two magic numbers, and they instantly go in your answer. X plus 1 times x plus the other. Done. That's why it's easy mode. If A is 1, you find those two numbers that fulfill that criteria on your chart, and you put them in your answer. If A is not 1, then you're on hard mode. It's a little more difficult, only because there's more steps. Because now what you need to do is, instead of that B term as is, you're going to split it in two. But not equal parts. You're going to split it into those two numbers you found. Look at that example. Instead of negative 13x, we have minus 10x minus 3x. We've written it out. We've made it a little bit worse before it gets better. Write it long form. And now, how many terms do I have? So now, what process can I use? Grouping. Right? Now let's factor by grouping. You go back. Say, okay, this pair, what do they have in common? 5x. This pair, what do they have in common? Negative 3. And I'm left with x minus 2 on both halves. If you do not get the same thing, if this is x minus 2 and this is x minus 1, you did something wrong. Or it's not actually factorable. So that's a check, right? These better match. If not, go back through. Be sure before you decide it's unfactorable. And now we pull x minus 2, that's one term, 5x minus 3, that's the last term. All right? Questions there? No? Okay, try number 2. See if you can do it FBI. Stare at it a little bit. Is it coming to you? Not quite? Okay, write a few options down. When you've got that one, carry on and do. Why did I highlight 10? Is it because I have the answer in here somewhere? No. Okay. Do 6 next. Number 6 next, and we'll check in. We've got 10 more minutes to go, so we'll stop and check a couple answers, make sure you're on the right track, and then I'll leave you to do the rest. All right. Erie, what did you get for number 2? Viridiana, are you still with us?
Yes.
Good. What'd you get for number 2? Do you have an answer for number 2?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Were you saying things earlier?
X plus 1 and X plus 5.
X plus 1 times X plus 5. Is that what we got here? Yeah, excellent. All right, does anybody have an answer for 6? You got one? What did you get?
I have 4b plus 1 times b plus 2.
What did you say?
Times b plus 2.
Times b plus 2. All right, now the nice thing about factoring is it's always really easy to check your work. Right? We can try real quick, distribute those. 4b times b is 4b squared, check. 1 times 2 gives us 2, check. Okay, how about the middle terms? 4b times 2 is 8b. 1 times b is another b. 8b plus 1b gives 9b. That's our middle term. Yes, it works out. Very good. Okay, you've got 8 more minutes. I want you to, for today, go back to finish 1 through 4 if you haven't already. Do these 1 through 8. This looks like 7 is already done for you. You're welcome. These ones 1 through 10. And, even more, 4 through 11 down here. Right? I'm throwing a lot of practice on today. That's how important this skill is, all right? Okay. And then, actually, before you get started, hold the phone. Let me bring up one other thing. All right? The homework post today. SAT practice test. Okay? Part of this year is preparing you for the SAT, which means there will be weekly practices on SAT style questions. The first thing we're going to do, though, is take a diagnostic. I want to see how you're doing right now, where you're at as far as SAT math. So, 25 question test. Take no more than an hour. Right? That's your time limit. Sometime over this weekend. Sit down. Set up a nice space, no interruptions, no distractions. Do all that you can do on these 25 questions. If you can, print out and use the bubble sheet. That'll be good practice. Right? Quite likely that you will be taking this test in person once again, so you'll have to fill out bubbles. That's a skill. You've got to practice it. All right? If not, type up a document and upload that instead. That's okay. But calculator, scratch work. That's it. No other resources. Don't look up anything. Don't ask anybody for help. Just see what you can do. Your score here is not important to me. I'm more interested in how it will then compare later in the year. Right? But points just for doing it. And then next week and every week thereafter, there will be 10 questions for practice running through all of the SAT math topics. Okay? Questions there? That sound means you have 5 minutes left in class. Do as much as you can.
But if the policy is accurate of what the question is,
That PDF has everything. That has the bubble sheet and all the questions. Right. 5 minutes work time. We'll stop the YouTube right here.